You are now listening to the Masters Mahan podcast.
Episode 23, Covering Your Assets 2, or How Big Is Your Cox? This episode may be deemed inappropriate for some listeners. If you have been abused or are a minor, you should stop now. This episode builds on the previous ones. Every organization on planet Earth has a vested interest in controlling people, be it governments, religions, or the occult. Control can range from simple peer pressure or fear-shaming to physical ownership. As a reoccurring theme, we will explore reoccurring actors from time to time. While the actor might change the wig he is wearing, his voice comes from his ventriloquist, the very same one who has his hands up society's for centuries. Power and money must always be consolidated in order to cover your own assets.
I hate this.
So much of the smoke and mirrors we are told to follow are merely the red flags meant to distract us from the ones pulling our strings. Shakespeare understood it when he penned, "All the world is a stage, and we are merely the players."
That stuff makes pure mescaline seem like ginger beer, man. Adrenochrome.
There were covens in Europe, that's what they're called, the congregation. They use blood in their rituals, and the blood that has the most power is baby's blood. And they don't just use the blood, they use the flesh, too.
Rosemary.
Can't we just accept this as the new normal?
Hollywood, to me, is sort of a branch of the CIA. I think it's just been laced with intelligence operations. Mind control really runs rampant in Hollywood among the musicians and the acting community. It's just everywhere.
I pledge to be a better ally for the LGBTQ plus community. I and the leadership team are determined to use this moment on how we can take action.
Well, the truth is different these days. It's more of a hunch you're willing to die for.
No, it's not.
If in some small way we have increased awareness, tolerance, and acceptance of gay-themed issues in the media, then we welcome that as a happy byproduct of our work.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.
Since the so-called Mormons are and were the only group of constitutionally protected American citizens ever ordered to be exterminated in mass, we call that today genocide, without trial in the United States, it is a major tell that something very dark has been going on for too long a time. Let's explore it by stepping into the darkness while speaking bluntly, as the Masons do when they say, "Let's talk on the square."
You will say "I," announce your name in full, and in an audible tone of voice, repeat after me. I, of my own free will and accord, in addition to my former obligations, that I will always hail, forever conceal, and never reveal, any of the secret arts, parts, or points, of the hidden mysteries of Freemasonry, appertaining to the degree of Master Mason, to any person, under the canopy of heaven, except it be, to a true and lawful brother of this degree, or within the body, of a just, and legally constituted lodge, of Master Masons, and neither unto him nor them, till after strict trial, to examination, or lawful information, furthermore, that I will aid and assist, all distressed, worthy brother Master Masons, their widows and orphans, whosoever dispersed around the globe, that I will keep the secrets, of a brother Master Mason, as my own, when given to me, in charge as such, murder and treason accepted. Furthermore, that I will not violate the chastity of a brother Master Mason's wife, daughter, sister, mother or widow, or suffer the same, to be done by another. Furthermore, that I will not give the grand hailing sign of this degree, unless I am in real distress, or for instruction, finding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my body severed in twain. My bowels taken thence, and burned to ashes, and the ashes cast to the four winds of heaven, that no more remembrance may be had of me among men and Masons forever.
So help me God,
and keep me steadfast in the due observance of this, my solemn obligation, as a Master Mason. Now, touch your hand, bow your head, in token of your sincerity, kiss the Holy Bible in which you now believe. Brother Senior Warden, release the candidate from the faith, though it being 3 times around his naked body is to signify that he is now bound to fraternity by a 3-fold tie. Being in a condition of darkness, the Senior Warden assist me in bringing the candidate from darkness to see the light by which Master Masons work. The first objects presented here being brought from darkness are the 3 great lights of Freemasonry, as before, with this difference. You now observe both points of the compasses, elevated above the square, which is to teach you that you are now about to receive all the light which can be conferred upon you in the Lodge of Master Masons. And that you're not to lose sight of this valuable instrument, by which we are taught to circumscribe our desires, keep our passions within due bounds toward all mankind, particularly our brother.
Well, we could easily use other groups of Americans, such as Black America or Native America, and we still will if we don't run out of time and the freedom to speak the truth openly on the square. Let's use Utah here to get us started, since even larger America is puzzled by what they see happening to a once proudly independent American subculture. Every state in the Union has been compromised to a greater or lesser degree, but today Utah has been called the second most corrupt state government in the nation, after
we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Biden's Delaware.
I'm not that person.
Even Fox News has been questioning what is happening.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. When you think of American states that have fallen right off the ledge into the deep end of vacuous lifestyle liberalism, you probably think of Vermont. Vermont's a place that banned fracking despite the fact it has not a single oil or gas well in the state. Or maybe you think of Massachusetts, where virtually all human pleasure has been banned for decades. Of course, you think of California, a place where one city is now paying people to be transgender. All of these are famously liberal places, so you're not surprised. But Utah is not a liberal place. When you think of Utah, you imagine big, happy families, an even bigger salty lake, and a couple of very good ski mountains. You think conservatism because Utah is conservative. It always has been. It still is. Utah has the highest rate of church attendance in the country. It has one of the lowest crime rates. The birth rate of Utah families is fully 25% higher than the national average. In the last presidential election, Donald Trump took nearly 60% of the vote in Utah. So Utah is definitely not California. And yet, some of its most prominent politicians would very much like to change that. If you don't believe it, watch them talk sometime. They sound like they're running for city council in Santa Monica. That doesn't make sense. Talk about a misalignment. A highly conservative state with extremely liberal leaders. How did that happen? Actually, it's not as unusual as you'd hope it would be. Across the country, some of the most liberal Republicans represent some of the reddest states. Why? Well, maybe it's the result of corporate influence and corrupt party leadership. That's true. Maybe voters in those states don't feel threatened, so they're not paying close attention to who they vote for. Whatever it is, it's very obvious. It tells you a lot. Meanwhile, bright red Utah is now led by a cut-rate Gavin Newsom imitator called Spencer Cox. Spencer Cox is a former telecom executive who always seems like he's auditioning for the title of America's guiltiest white guy. He's beyond belief.
In order to understand it, we have to go back into the past. While we could go back as far as Joseph Smith and Brigham Young calling out the Illuminati and the emergence of Big Pharma in the 1800s. For our purposes here, let's just go back to the 1930s, to the machinations of so-called Illuminati prophet, British author, and Fabian Society member, H.G. Wells, whose name was Herbert George Wells, not to be confused with George Herbert Walker Bush, or Utah's past governor Herbert, who put in place Utah's current governor.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am Governor Spencer Cox, and I have the pleasure today of hosting the first One Utah Student Town Hall. And my preferred pronouns are he, him, and his. That's how you get those legs up.
Spencer Cox. So don't confuse those polar bears with this one, Herbert George Wells. Wells was a fat diabetic and one of the founders of what we might call today Britain's Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers, Diabetic, Richard Simmons, Eat Less Crumpets Dripped in Butter Toffee People Society. It was at one of those meetings, or more likely at the Satanic Fabian Society, that he said, you know, using real Luciferian magic. Let's go back in time and hear him say it himself.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to present our guest speaker, H.G. Wells.
My dear fat friends, we diabetics
Diabetes.
must take the die out of dieting and take the bet out of diabetics. I know. I play with words. But it is our future I want to prophesy about today. Harriet, how did you sneak that in here? Did you just pull a confectionery out of your brassiere? No. You did! Harriet, no, don't do it. Put down that donut. Crikey, your blood sugar must be over 200, you fat cow. Do you want to end up blind in one eye and filled with mental confusion like that stupid American? Oh, Americans, fat gits that they are. From its very start, they were all Caribbean cane sugar and tobacco. Shortly after inception, Americans failed to expand their ideas, but not their waistline. Am I right, people? You know I have. They did grow bodily, immensely. And for more than a century, they lived on imported brain food. Hattie, you temptress. Is that a bag of Rotry's chili toss? Thomas! For the love of fat Queen Victoria, remember your neuropathy. Yummy. Yummy. Hello. Break out the emergency insulin IV. All right, people. The insulin is coming. We Fabians, along with our brothers, taught Columbia's children what to think, not how to think. Americans left the mass education of their children to underpaid teachers and silly, repetitive women like Bessie here. Woodrow Wilson was a perfect example of an Illuminati useful idiot. He thought he was a ray of hope, but he was a mental ward. A patsy, a rat of all making. He alone is responsible for removing blacks from federal leadership, the sellout of American banking, the communization of the Orient, the rise of Ho Chi Minh, and the start of socialization of America towards a one-world government under our command. There is no bigger rube than a self-righteous white male socialist pretending to uphold democracy. We will fracture the American Union first, and then the rest of the world along racial, ideological, and class-based lines. The Americans like to say, order out of chaos. We will be their new order, if we first cause their chaos. As I foresee it, the one major stumbling block to America will be Utah. They alone, and maybe Hawaii too, I'm not clear on that yet, have a common brotherhood born from constitutional discrimination. As we march their society away from their individual constitutional freedoms, Utah will be the group that may not submit. Thus our only hope is to fracture them from within, rotting them from the inside. I foresee that it must come from the top down. As long as Mormons believe that all is well in their little Zion, we can put them to sleep and take them over. We Fabians have already charted their complete takeover. Starting... What? Are you sure? What? Are you sure? This is the Diabetics Club and not the Fabian Society? We must contain this. Harold, lock the doors! Bring out the Nestle bars! Cancel the insulin! Don't worry. They'll all be dead in an hour.
Diabetes.
Herbert George Wells was right about so many things. Betty did eventually go blind because she couldn't stop eating Rotry's confectionaries, and Thomas did have to have 3 of his toes amputated. But perhaps more important to our current world issues, the men and women who founded Utah were the only American citizens in the history of our republic to have had an extermination order issued against them in defiance of their constitutional rights. This order was not rescinded until 1976, although by then this call for genocide had largely been forgotten. Do an internet search for the extermination order against the Mormons and see it for yourself. And be shocked that this happened in America. The point here is that just as the outrage of the American Indian Wars unified Native American tribes more tightly together, so did the American extermination order against the Mormons more tightly melded them into a family. Blood is thicker than Hershey's chocolate, as Herbert George Wells well knew.
Hey, white chocolate's not even chocolate. It doesn't even contain cocoa solids.
So, in order to create a one-world government, the plan had to be struck to pull apart both native reservations.
Teach 'em, pale-faced brother, all about Red Man. Now you know why the Red Man's red.
And the Utah family, too. The Illuminati did start a massive campaign to take over all Christian churches. They are the ones who started America's National Council of Churches and the World Council of Churches worldwide to function the same as the United Nations does. It hasn't entirely worked, but they are patient. Do an internet search for Billy Graham Illuminati. But guard your heart. You are not going to like what you find out. By 1960, most Christian churches, at their top anyway, worldwide, were under Illuminati control. Myron Fagan, one of the top whistleblowers in terms of Luciferian secrets, gave this plea to American Christians before his passing.
Now, do you know that the National Council of Churches passed a resolution in San Francisco which states that the United States will soon have to subordinate its will to that of the UN, and that all American citizens must be prepared to accept it? Is your church a member of the National Council of Churches? In connection with that, bear in mind that God is never mentioned in the UN Charter, and their meetings are never opened with prayer. The creators of the UN stipulated in advance that there should be no mention of God or Jesus Christ in the UN Charter or in its UN headquarters. Does your pastor subscribe to that? Find out. Furthermore, do you know that the great majority of the so-called nations in the UN are anti-Christianity? That the UN is a completely godless organization by orders of its creators, the CFR Illuminati. Now I have one more vital message to deliver. One of the 4 specific assignments Rothschild gave Jacob Schiff was to create a movement to destroy religion in the United States, with Christianity to be the chief target. Schiff turned that job over to Rockefeller for another specific reason. The destruction of Christianity could be accomplished only by those who are entrusted to preserve it, by the pastors, the men of the cloth. As a starter, John D. Rockefeller picked up a young so-called Christian minister by the name of Dr. Harry F. Ward, Reverend Ward, if you please. At that time, he was teaching religion at the Union Theological Seminary. Rockefeller found a very willing Judas in this reverend. Thereupon, in 1907, he financed him to set up the Methodist Foundation of Social Service. And Ward's job was to teach bright young men to become so-called ministers of Christ and to place them as pastors of churches. While teaching them to become ministers, the Reverend Ward also taught them how to very subtly and craftily preach to their congregations that the entire story of Christ is a myth, to cast doubts on the divinity of Christ, to cast doubts about the Virgin Mary. In short, to cast doubts on Christianity as a whole. It was not to be a direct attack, but much of it by crafty insinuation that was to be applied in particular to the youth in the Sunday schools. Remember Lenin's statement? Give me just one generation of youth and I'll transform the whole world. Then, in 1908, the Methodist Foundation of Social Service, which incidentally was America's first Communist Front organization, changed its name to the Federal Council of Churches. By 1950, the Federal Council of Churches was becoming very suspect. So in 1950, they changed the name to the National Council of Churches. Do I have to tell you more about how this National Council of Churches is deliberately destroying faith in Christianity? I don't think so. But this I will tell you. If you are a member of any congregation whose pastor and church are members of this Judas organization, your contributions are helping the Illuminati's plot to destroy religion and your faith in God and Jesus Christ. Thus, you are deliberately delivering your children to be indoctrinated with disbelief in God and church, and which can easily transform them into atheists. Find out immediately if your church is a member of the National Council of Churches, and for the love of God and your children, if it is, withdraw from it at once. However, let me warn you, that same destroy religion process has been infiltrated into other denominations. As a matter of fact, the Mormon Church is about the only one I know of that is clean of that kind of Judas infiltration. But of course, there are many individual churches and pastors who are honest and sincere. Find one such for yourself and for your children.
And so you see a second reason that Utah scared the one-worlders. By the time Myron made his warning to all Christians, most of our national telecommunication executives and their extended families were under Illuminati control as well. Remember that. So, Utah was a problem now for them for two reasons. Various plots were tried. Even Ted Bundy was sent to Utah, but he couldn't control himself. Do an internet search for Ted Bundy, George W. Bush, and see what comes up. Be sure to click the Images tab on your browser search, too.
I'm a bastard.
But the real success began when High Wizard and longest-running U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd ordered the satanic branch of the Cox family
Stop that.
to infiltrate the Mormon Church in 1979. Remember that Luciferians say that it's okay to join a Christian church just as long as you come back to Satan when he orders you to. Christians can be very naive at times. In fact, the Mormons have a warning in their additional scriptures. It reads something like this: "In the latter days, the devil will pacify and lull men away into carnal security, that they will say, All is well in Zion, yea, Zion prospereth, all is well. And thus the devil cheateth their souls, and leadeth them away carefully down into hell. And others he will flatter, Woe be unto him that is at ease in Zion. Woe be unto him that crieth, All is well. Cursed is he that puts his trust in man, or maketh flesh his strength, or shall hearken unto the precepts of men, unless those precepts shall be given by the power of the Holy Ghost." We'll let Senator Byrd's MK Ultra sex slave Kathy O'Brien tell us about this in her own words.
In 1977, I was a 19-year-old mind-controlled program slave in the CIA DIA Project Monarch Freedom Train operation, literally owned by U.S. Senate Majority Robert, who was then a 20-year incumbent on the Senate Appropriations Committee. As Byrd's own little witch or sex slave, I would also become involved in covert government operations. I now understand that this required more memory compartments and personalities than I had developed previously. Hence, one more reason for the mind-shattering occult ritual and my predestined marriage to a Cox. In typical Project Monarch structure, Bird was my owner and in control of my life, while Cox became my primary handler and followed Bird's orders to ensure that I was at key locations and events at appropriate times, and to maintain me under mind control. Cox was reportedly not paid cash for his role. Instead, he either followed orders or would be prosecuted for distributing drugs and being the occult serial killer that he was. Cox's primary role was to shatter my mind further through repeated occult trauma, as well as father my daughter Kelly to be raised in the genetic mind control studies of Project Monarch. The Cox were Illuminati. I was sent to Nashville and ordered to Cox, who took me to the back of his hometown for months at a time for occult traumatization. My Cox had been brought up in witchcraft by his mother, and admittedly he longed for her sexually and ritualistically. Together they subjected me to their beliefs, which included what equates to a weekend version of mind control just by witches for centuries, anchored in superstition rather than in scientific fact. These superstitious beliefs seemingly conflicted with Cox's mercenary training to the point that his killing raged out of control. For example, Cox would murder a human through repeated stabbings with a knife, believing that the departed spirit and splattered blood gave him power in order to control my mind. In truth, it was my aversion and subsequent traumatization by these events that caused me to disassociate and trance, leaving my subconscious open to his suggestions and the suggestions of others. During the 3 years I was with Cox, he ritually impregnated and aborted me 6 times. Consuming several of his own offspring and preserving the others, shaped in ceramic for sale in his interstate occult body parts business. Cox's MO for murdering always included removing the hands with a machete as the hands of glory. These he would kiln dry in the ceramic shop of his and his mother's house. These were in high demand and thus distributed throughout the occult underground supply network. As a member of the occult, Cox's drug and body parts distribution routes were protected for him. These included routes into Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Florida. Cox and I traveled to Florida on several occasions, as his mother's parents lived in Mims, which is only minutes away from the NASA Kennedy Space Center in Titusville. Cox made sure that I was there for mind control programming and testing as ordered. I was left there at the NASA installation many times for torture and programming. Cox had a variety of belief systems that he applied to various situations, all of which were superstition-based. He believed in spirit communication or divine guidance through nature spirits and demons, and that Satan had to be appeased. He believed that Jesus is an alien, and the Bermuda Triangle is a door to another dimension, and the end of the world is very near. We were ordered to become Mormons.
Kathy will have more to say to us later on many subjects, and we applaud her bravery. Now, while not all Coxes are Satanists, the ones who are connect to the Illuminati Merovingian bloodline. They are regulars at the Bohemian Grove each July in California. Harold Cox, best buddy-bud of H.G. Wells, with Lady Cohen and Cecil Collins, helped Margaret Sanger start Planned Parenthood to lower the world's black population first, and then the Asians and Latinos next. It seems that none of these were Nazi white enough for their taste buds. Now, just as we have said before with all Illuminati last names, it is unfair to connect every Cox to the Illuminati.
You're like a flower that grew out of a pot of dirt.
Jesus Christ gave us the clue. One must judge a cock
In the woods there grew a tree, and a fine, fine tree was he.
No, that's not right. Stupid 5G radiation radiating my brain. One must judge a tree by its fruit.
And on that bed there was a girl, and on that girl there was a man, and from that man there was a seed, and from that seed there was a boy, and from that boy there was a man, and for that man there was a grave, and from that grave there grew a tree.
So we have to look at a cock objectively and judge its fruit to see where a dark one might pop up.
Remarkably, Barack Obama himself has repeatedly slipped up and called her Michael over and over again.
Men and women of the finest military in the world. Most of all, Michael and I.
Is anything scary?
You know, well, when Michelle's mad.
Have you ever met a man who accidentally calls his wife by a man's name?
Spencer Cox is a former telecom executive who always seems like he's auditioning for the title of America's guiltiest white guy. He's beyond belief. Watch this virtual town hall with high school students last year, in which Spencer Cox announces his preferred pronouns to a young girl in the audience.
Well, thank you so much, Gabby, for that question. And my preferred pronouns are he, him, and his. So thank you for sharing yours with me.
Ooh, what a creepy guy. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his, Cox tells a room full of children. So we've got that cleared up. Spencer Cox identifies as a male, at least to some limited extent. Now, Fox could have cleared up that mystery a lot more quickly simply by declaring, I'm a man. Instead, he went full hostage video. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his. Just in case you had any doubt that neoliberal interest groups control Spencer Cox's brain. Now you know for certain. Because it's never about gender, it's always about obedience. Spencer Cox is obedient.
Good boy. And a good boy obeys.
If nothing else, but not obedient to his voters. That's the weird thing. What exactly is the market for superfluous pronouns in Utah? Pretty limited, you would think. Most people in Utah don't need to be told. Yet somehow Spencer Cox is their governor. In a piece today, a really good piece, Nate Hochman of National Review reports that the very first document Cox signed as governor of Utah was something called the Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And it's everything you'd imagine and more. The document describes racism as, quote, more than just an individual character flaw. No, racism instead is a system that you participate in, Mr. and Mrs. Racist, a system that can only be stopped with, quote, bold anti-racist actions and policies right now. Ooh, you know you're in trouble, Mr. and Mrs. Utah voter. What are these policies? We'll let Spencer Cox explain. Here is Spencer Cox wearing his little obedience mask during a Zoom interview, explaining that he supports excluding white students from an academic scholarship program purely because of their skin color, because that's anti-racism. No, it's not racism. It's anti-racism.
The Utah Jazz is excluding white children from consideration for their scholarship program. Do you think this is racist? And what will you do to prevent the Utah Jazz from acting in this racist manner?
Well, I don't think it's racist. In fact, I think it's in response to, unfortunately, some very difficult and racist injustices that have happened in our community for a long time.
So here's this moist little guy sitting alone in his gilded room with a mask on telling us it's not racist to exclude people from a scholarship based on their race. Does anyone else in Utah believe this? We'd like to meet them. There can't be many of them. Most people in Utah have more sense than that. Racism is when you hurt people based on their skin color, right? Right. And most people in Utah, by the way, still believe in biology, also gravity and photosynthesis. The state of Utah is pro-science. And we know this because Utah State Legislature just passed a bill banning men from competing in women's sports because men, it turns out, are not women. But Spencer Cox disagrees. He vetoed that bill. Fortunately, 2/3 of the legislature overrode Spencer Cox's veto and finally got the bill passed. This has been going on for a long time in the state of Utah. Spencer Cox previously threatened to veto a proposed ban on gender transition surgeries for minors, which, once again, most people in Utah say they don't want. So here you have a perfectly normal state filled with perfectly happy, normal people, somehow run by a low-IQ weekend MSNBC anchor. That doesn't seem fair to the state of Utah, but it's not just Spencer Cox. Utah's junior senator, Mitt Romney, has also decided he's tired of representing the people of Utah. So instead, he's speaking for his neighbors in the state of California, where he lives a lot of the time. Less than a year ago, this is an amazing example, it was just June of 2021, Mitt Romney voted against the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Okay, he thought she wasn't qualified. Now, this week, Mitt Romney announced that he is supporting the same person's confirmation to the Supreme Court. Huh? She was unqualified for a lower court, but a perfect choice for the Supreme Court? How does that work? Here's Mitt Romney to explain.
In the prior confirmation, I was concerned that she was outside the mainstream. And as a result of our meeting for an hour together and reviewing her testimony before Congress, I became convinced that she's within the mainstream. She's also highly qualified, intelligent, capable person, and I wish her the very best.
Oh, so she's now in the mainstream. She wasn't less than a year ago, but now she's fully in the mainstream. So here's what it took for Mitt Romney to finally support Ketanji Brown Jackson. He learned in the course of Supreme Court confirmation hearings that she gave lenient sentences to child pornographers. Mitt Romney apparently didn't know that last year, hence the vote against her. Now that he knows that Ketanji Brown Jackson has disregarded sentencing guidelines to benefit kiddie pornographers, it's a yes for Mitt Romney.
What Tucker doesn't know or didn't want to say here is that the state of Michigan, where Mitt grew up and was a young man, was the major production location for kiddie porn in the entire United States. Do an internet search for Mitt Romney MK Ultra program.
Oh, but most of all, for butterfly kisses after bedtime prayer.
Assuming it hasn't all been scrubbed from the internet. We'll have more on this, but for now, we'll let Tucker continue.
That's the junior senator from the state of Utah. And as with Spencer Cox, this is not a one-time aberration. Reporter Greg Price summarized Mitt Romney's past few weeks this way, quote, confirmed Ketanji Brown Jackson, voted against repealing TSA mask mandate, didn't show up to vote defunding Biden vaccine mandate, accuses Tulsi Gabbard of treason for opposing the war in Ukraine. Amazing! Mitt Romney is not alone, of course, neither is Spencer Cox. It turns out a lot of Republicans in red states serially betray their voters, give them the finger day after day after day. The question is, how long will Republican voters put up with this?
Since Senator Byrd gave Utah the bird when he ordered the satanic Coxes to take over Utah, does this answer Tucker's question? Since Utah got the big cock, things have gotten worse. What most Utards don't understand is that Spencer plans to meter and steal all the state's water rights and use them to control all development in the state. Somehow he strong-armed the LDS Church into turning over, apparently for free, thousands of shares of their water rights obtained for the whole church body by their pioneer ancestors. Now they belong to the state. Water is life in the desert. If Spency gets all the water rights, even your ditch water rights, which he plans to also meter, the next plan is to use those to control and force development in the state into the Illuminati 15-minute cities. We have just told you the truth. Believe it or not. Recently, the Republican Party tried to remove Cox from the ballot since he didn't win his party's nomination. But since current Utah law, since Cox has the conflict of interest that the lieutenant governor of their state runs the election for the governor and the lieutenant governor, and the executive branch of Utah is a bloated imperial dictatorship, And twice now, Cox has refused to let anyone see the election results, and in some counties over 100% of the population voted. This could go on and on for quite a long time, because Utards are asleep. So, while some cocks are really big, others only think they are. Utards need to get some balls and fast, or they will find out that the homesteads laid out for them by their pioneer ancestors, and all the rights given to them in blood by their forefathers in the Constitution, will amount to little more than... We hope that Utah can pull back the curtain.
I am Oz, the great and powerful. Who are you? Who are you?
Change the scene, or at least unzip the fly and have a good look at the cocks behind the zipper.
Stop that.
Back through the water curtain. The Cox family likes to pretend that their surname means a variety of many lofty things. You will find that the list is as long as 15 different theories. This is because they don't want you to know that anciently a Cox was a servant to an elitist master. In Old English, the boy that managed his master's stables, for example, was called the hitchcock. There are many others: adcock, badcock, peacock, piecock, simcock, woodcock, and more. The idea in time of a rooster being a cock is an ancient pagan concept. If an older man wanted to have sex with a younger boy legally, he could do it and then give him a rooster or a cock for his cock as a gift, making the act legal. The modern remnant of this still remains when you take a cock and circle it about your head, as the Khazarian mafia still does today. Further, just as a young stable slave would wake up each morning to the cock crowing in praise of the rising sun, so would the boy's own cock stand in salute. The ancient Egyptian priests would stand and face the sun, letting their own cocks Sieg Heil, which incidentally is the real secret behind the Hitler salute, and the words Sieg Heil, which means hail the rising sun. So now you know more than you did before.
It's great to learn, because knowledge is power.
Luciferian magic is really quite stupid when you finally understand it. But the real question for Utah is just which bringer of light does Cox's cock salute? We will yet explore other states and cultures in their turn. More to come.
There's something going on around here that just don't add up.
You gotta keep on your toes. Toes, that is.
Rationale for fair use of copyrighted items used. Fair use law allows fair use when copyrighted material is being used to make a specific educational, research-based, scholarly, and/or critical comment on the work being used.
You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Masters Mayhon will continue.